Hey there, ladies and gentle boys, Spazzy here, aka Syndromes, and I've learned something today. Well, not exactly today, more like throughout the course of the last few weeks. So, yeah. The obvious needs to be gotten out of the way. So first of all, this video is not scripted, so expect a lot of pauses and stuttering and stuff. And secondly, the video part of this video is footage that has almost absolutely nothing to do with the actual video itself, nor the topic that I'm going to be talking about. Or rather, it actually has everything to do with it, it's just that it's like the thing that I'm going to be talking about is the direct result of the footage that you're currently looking at. Right, so the footage that you're currently looking at is the part of a project, of a video project of mine, that at this point is never going to see the light of day. More on that in a moment, but essentially it started off with me wanting to make a video about one of my most favorite games. So that was going to be a video about my experiences with Unreal Tournament 2004. And I wanted to make it kind of in-depth, to the best of my ability anyway. I'm, not really doing the professional game reviews sort of thing on this YouTube channel for obvious reasons. And, yeah, so the problem there is that it spiraled a little bit out of control, because as I was starting to talk about the game and kind of going in depth as to why I thought it was such a big deal, why was this game such a game changer, for the lack of a better word, in comparison to what I used to play during that time, I had to go back and explain my experiences with games in general, and of course the games that I was playing up until that point. It kind of slowly became a video about my experiences with gaming during the early 2000s in general, and how my games, slowly progressed through to get to Unreal Tournament 2004. So at that point, I started understanding that unless I actually tackle that subject, it might leave out a lot of the context, as to why I wanted to make the video about 2004 in the first place, and it kind of spiraled out of control. And the idea there was, at some point, I figured out, okay, screw it, let me make a whole, documentary as to how I got into video games and why, how I got to where I am right now. Because I thought that the carrying nugget of the whole project would be the fact that I was born in 1990, the same year as my country gained its independence from the Soviet Union. And as many of you probably know, the Soviet Union was very stunted in terms of electronics and, technology in general, at least, its civilian population. And the problem there, not the problem even, the funny part is that even though I grew up in the 90s, I experienced the whole gaming industry from about a decade ago. So somewhere around 1996, I got my first video game console that was a NES, well, a clone of a Russian clone of an NES, and that was basically the best thing ever because, well, we didn't really have better at that time. And so I thought it would have been an interesting video just from the point of view of a, Eastern slash Northern post-Soviet kind of kid growing up in the 90s, and, how I got to the mainstream gaming industry standards that, I kind of, for the most part, follow today. The problem there was that, and I'm slowly coming to the whole point of this video in a moment, is that I've always thought that nostalgia was just enjoying the things that you enjoyed in your childhood, but that's really not the case. And that is what that's what I mean when I said I've learned something about myself during this project, and even though that project itself is never going to see the light of day because it spiraled way out of control, and at the time recording this video, the script for that video is nearing its 1 hour 20-minute mark. It is just way too absurd at this point to finish, at least in my current state of mind. But I wanted to make this video first and foremost for myself, because I want to remember this experience and look back at this video if I ever decide to do something similar again, because I learned the hard way that nostalgia is not exactly what I thought it would be, and how I always kind of, viewed it. So, essentially what happened is that when I started making that video, and I started to finish the script itself, I had to start getting footage. And footage would usually come in the form of looking back at which games I wanted to specifically cover, getting the appropriate software for it in the, for example, a emulator, and getting the footage for the video itself. Now the thing is, well, first of all, I found out that getting ROM images is actually much harder than I remember it to be. I do have some videos on this channel that I definitely used to have a ROM emulator, and I had a place where to get ROMs, but it looks like in the past few years, overall, those sites have been specifically targeted by the perceived copyright owners of those ROMs, so, XD. And I really don't ever since I got a job and became a fully functional adult, using torrents and, shady ways to obtain games is kind of something I've not really specifically avoided, but rather I'd never really felt the need to do that. But yeah, once I started making these videos, I started realizing that I have very good memories of those days when I used to play those games, to the point where sometimes you have that moment where you're walking around during the spring and some sort of, smell of burning leaves or something like that hits you as people are, dealing with the stuff in their backyard, for example, and you just, suddenly the memories of your childhood come flooding back. It's like, oh no, nostalgia. Well, not exactly. So what happened is that I started installing all these things, and I started playing them, and it really did hit me at that point. Unreal Tournament 2004 is by far my most important game, and easily one of the most favorite games I will instantly mention if someone asks me, but I don't have it installed on my PC. There is a reason for that, and it's simply the fact that gaming technology in general has reached to a point where I have some sort of, not standards per se, but rather I have an expectation of what makes a game worth getting into, especially when it comes to a multiplayer game. And these games, even though they really do mean a lot for me, simply don't hold up anymore. I went as far as to install some of the very old titles. Like, I dug up my retail version of Half-Life, and I used it to install the original 1.5 mod version of Counter-Strike. And I started playing it. It was fun. Trying to figure out how to install bots is still a bit of a bish, to put it lightly. But it was a nostalgic experience all the same. But was it a fun gaming experience? I would argue against that. So, TLDR, it's coming to it, yeah. TLDR, I have a feeling that these memories that I would consider as nostalgic has really nothing to do with the games at all. And I know for a fact that people have already said that before. Oh, it's not about the games, it's about the childhood in general and an easier life. Yeah, an easier life. What does that mean? An easier life means that back in the... I remember the days where I didn't wake up in the morning realizing that, perhaps getting a daily dose, like a daily morning dose of ibumetin 400 milligram pills is probably not a healthy way to live one's life, but that has somehow come to me as a part of my everyday routine. And yeah, there's a meme about that. But yeah, I started looking into this, and it hit me home so hard that I legit just went to like Google View and started visiting the old places. I took a look around on Google Street View where my old school was, where I used to live, for example. And yeah, it kind of went completely off the rail. And yeah, nostalgia. What the hell is nostalgia? Nostalgia is really is realizing that those were experiences that you remember very fondly, and obviously video games is what are one of the more simpler things to reference, but I will never go back. There is physically no way I will ever go back to relive those experiences because I don't have the everyday context for them. Like, it's not about eating your favorite like childhood breakfast cereal during the morning. It's about the fact that in 15 minutes from there you'd be going to school, and that's something you just cannot relive anymore. The same thing is about me remembering, when I used to come home during the autumn days when, there's a lot of leaves falling down the trees, and I'm coming home with that amazing feeling that I just bought my first transport, my first big transport in in Discovery Freelancer, a Border Worlds transport, and holy hell, I'm going to have the best experience ever. I do not remember a single good moment on that on that ship itself. I don't remember the name of that character, but I remember heading home from school being completely hyped about it. And again, it's not really about the game, is it? Even these days, Disco is, I think, finally a closed chapter in my overall experience. And it really is for a lot of these games. I remember playing the frick out of, say, Rock and Roll Racing on the Genesis, but I don't remember a single map. I do not remember, for the most part, most of the vehicles or the characters in that game, but I do remember heading down the high-rise staircase to the second floor where my best friend used to live, because he owned the console itself and I bought the game, and we would play hours on end. It's nostalgia. It's nostalgia for the game, but it's the context itself. I did reinstall a Genesis emulator. I did reinstall this game. I played a couple of things, like a couple of games in general. Yeah, I remember playing them. It's a good feeling, but it really is just about the context of what was going around during those times for me. So, for example, my first actual experiences with a computer game on the PC, I mean, came in the form of a internet cafe. So I would actually wake up during the Saturdays and Sundays very early on at like 6:30 in the morning and grab like a coin, like one coin, the our currency's equivalent of €1, and I would go there across like three suburbs just to get to that internet cafe, just so I can play my favorite game on the PC that I would usually be on, because that's where my save was, and I would just hope to whatever, superficial deity I used to, I used to believe in back in those days, that some jackass didn't overwrite over it. And again, I actually went to Street View. I looked it up. Like, obviously that store, that business does not exist there anymore. I do not even remember how it looked like on the outside. I just remember that one PC with its big ass CRT monitor and I remember playing GTA 3 and just getting the quickest vehicle and just flipping it in like a moment. So, I've learned about what nostalgia actually is, and why I don't have my current hard drive full of these old games, and why I do kind of use video games in general as a sort of a timeline, because I remember what was happening during around that time when I remember that game. So, yeah. The reason, I guess, why I'm never going to finish this video is because the game is still good. Unreal Tournament 2004 is still fun to play, but there is a reason why I haven't been playing it for like years upon years. There's a reason why the last time I played it during the, before I reinstalled it for the sake of this video, was back in 2014. There's a reason why I cannot really talk about the game without talking about my real life, and that's kind of sad, really. I just realized during the making of this video that all of these fun memories about the old, cartoons that I used to watch, it really has nothing to do with the cartoons themselves. I had no control over what was shown on the telly. All I knew is that back in those days I still had grandparents that I used to visit. Back in those days I still had friends that I could just, go downstairs and knock on their door, because obviously I was a kid and I did not have a phone for a very long time. And yeah, it's not really depressing. It's just that it kind of made me appreciate the whole term nostalgia, because once you start remembering that, and I guess it kind of has to be, a certain part of your life where this is actually becoming relevant, because I'm pretty sure if someone still in their 20s is currently still watching this thing, even though I'm currently hitting the 17-minute mark on this recording, if you're watching this, chances are you have absolutely no clue why this is such a big deal for me. But let's just say that back in 2012, when I moved out of my parents' house for the first time and I started living on my own, there was this huge feeling of uncertainty. And during that point, it was just another stage of my life. I didn't even think about nostalgia unless it was, Nostalgia Critics reviews of, old shows that I used to watch. And even then, I could not appreciate the subtext of that. But ever since those days, my life has been a routine, because that is how a adult life is, even regardless of what kind of hobbies you have. At that point, you start realizing that the ongoing years of relative simplicity, I wouldn't call it monotone. It's more like there's less uncertainty about it. You know that tomorrow you are going to wake up and have a good day at work, no problem. You know that, in a couple of months, you are going to do this, or it has been 2 years since I've actually played X. Time has a very different meaning, and it's those days before that certainty that carries the biggest amount of what I would now call actual nostalgic value. It's only after you get your life kind of leveled out in terms of the ongoing incidents, be they good or bad, that you can actually start appreciating this sort of thing, or, not appreciating it. But yeah, thanks for watching this little video. This is, if this is future me watching this in like 10 years, this was the point where I realized that I was getting older, in a way that we would joke, grandparents talking about, old stories and such. But I think that, like, right now, as I'm about to hit 30 years old, I finally figured out what nostalgia is, and it's a noteworthy experience to the point where I'm going to just dump this 20-minute video on YouTube and, set it to public for the frick of it. No one's probably gonna watch it anyway. But, yeah. If you're still young, you probably have no freaking clue what I'm talking about right now. And I really hope that you will maybe remember this video at some point when you hit that moment and come to the same conclusion as I do. But, yeah, until then, life goes on. And even though this project never came to actual fulfillment, I do not regret doing it, because in the end I did get a lot out of it. So yeah, thanks for listening to this bullshit. Have a good one.